And good evening. Welcome back to another edition of Cyclone InCYders, the last one of the 2012 semester here at Iowa State. Alongside, as always, Matt Van Winkle. I'm your host, Aaron Bauer, and we're going to jump right into it. Matt, pretty big basketball game last night.
Pretty big.
2012 NCAA National Championship down in New Orleans was played, and probably the favorite of the whole tournament, probably the number one team throughout the entire year, came away with the trophy, the Kentucky Wildcats, with their Player of the Year, Anthony Davis, and it really wasn't a game until late. Kansas was able to close down the score within the last 3 minutes of the ball game, but Kentucky had control throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Kentucky didn't play the way that you thought they would. You know, Anthony Davis, their leading scorer throughout the whole year, wasn't the leading scorer in that game. Had struggled from the field, but he really did clean up the rebounds. But luckily for Kentucky, they've got 5 other guys that cleaned up for him. You know, you've got Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marcus Teague, Terrence Jones. Those guys just were unbelievable. They shot the ball great, especially, as you said, late in the game. It was such a back-and-forth game throughout the first half. It was so fast-paced. I really didn't think that Kansas was going to be able to stay with Kentucky. I don't know what you thought, but it was, wow. Kansas really came to play. I thought they played Kentucky probably their best game of the year. Not Kansas, that is. Kentucky probably played one of their worst in the tournament. But I don't know, what were your thoughts about last night?
Well, you know, going into this game, when you look at it, I thought Kansas was the team that really was going to give Kentucky some trouble with their size inside. Thomas Robinson, Jeff Withey. I thought they'd frustrate Anthony Davis a little bit more, and Terrence Jones. That wasn't the case. Those two are just solid players. Anthony Davis, showed why he's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. Very composed, especially for a freshman. And Terrence Jones, I think, is a guy that sometimes gets overlooked for Kentucky. A very powerful power forward that's going to do big things in the NBA as well. I think he's going to give people matchup problems further on in his career. If we can pull up the graphics here quickly for the national championship game, Kentucky, as we said before, got by Kansas 67-59, and it really was a tale of two halves. Going into halftime there, Kentucky had a pretty sizable lead, shot lights out, and then like Kansas had been doing the entire season, entire tournament that is, held Kentucky under 20%, or under 30% in the 20s for shooting in the second half, and got themselves back in the ballgame.
Well, absolutely. You look at the turnover numbers as well, and both these teams are, you know, you don't expect them to turn the ball over a lot. Just really athletic teams. You expected a hard-fought game, and that's exactly what it was. You know, I don't know about you, but I think Kentucky is going to be one of these teams, as they always are. They're going to be back in the tournament each and every year. You know, they're going to lose probably 5 or 6 guys to the NBA draft, probably 5 or 6 guys that could be potential lottery picks. And, you know, they're losing a lot of scoring, but you know Calipari is going to recruit well. You know he's going to bring in a lot of new talent. But it's going to be tough for these guys to lose a guy like Anthony Davis, who's, you know, that's their offense runs through him and, you know, goes out and scores a double-double each night, 22 points, 11 rebounds. I mean, this guy can do it all. And when you look at Kentucky, they're going to recruit well. They're going to bring guys in, and I'm just curious to see who the next Anthony Davis is going to be out there.
Yeah, and you know, like, you got to give credit to Kansas. They didn't go away. You know, Bill Self has these kids playing well. You got to remember, this is a Kansas team that wasn't even picked to win the Big 12. Texas A&M was picked to win the Big 12, and you saw where they finished down about 8th, I think it was. So this is a team that really overachieved, and it really showed what kind of coach Bill Self is, how he got these guys to play. And he said it was fun doing things that nobody expected you to do, and nobody had Kansas. Maybe the select few Kansas fans had Kansas in this national championship game. And once they got there, very, very few gave them a chance to actually win the ball game.
Right.
And, you know, it wasn't really close. If you say 5-7 points, 2 minutes left is close, then yeah, they were close. But Kansas really never was in the ball game. They struggled mightily, turning the ball over, and Kentucky's defense gave them fits.
Great coaching job by Bill Self, by the way. I mean, this team was not expected to do much this year. You know, they lose the Morris twins to the NBA. But then you got guys like Thomas Robinson that really just step up. You got great shooters on the floor. I mean, Self found the guys that he wanted to be on the court, and he found a great mix, and these guys love playing for him. It was evident to see that last night. You know, Bill Self, just outstanding coach, really deserving of the Big 12 Co-Coach of the Year with Hoiberg. And then, you know, we like to tie in Iowa State to the tournament, and Iowa State was one of, I think, only 3 teams that actually played Kansas and Kentucky this year. You know, they played Kentucky in the second round, played Kansas, you know, twice in the conference this year, and ended up, I think we were the only team of those 3 teams to actually beat either one of those teams. So pretty impressive for Iowa State to say they can beat Kansas, who made the national championship.
You know, Iowa State did get, like you said, got that victory over Kansas. And I thought Kansas really grew after that Iowa State basketball game. Started to get a lot of momentum. You remember that Missouri game down in Columbia, the crazy one where Kansas did lose. Then that magical comeback against those same Tigers down in Lawrence. So tough to play in Fog Allen. They got the W against Missouri. Missouri gets knocked out early. And then Kansas really, you know, Missouri was the Big 12 team that everybody thought was going to make a run to the championship. everybody kind of forgot.
And you. Including you.
And me. I had them winning it all. That didn't work so well. We'll stop talking about the brackets here. But Kansas, a team nobody really thought would go as far, and you could see how excited they were just to be there. You know, you got Kevin Young, T-Hand coming off the bench. Everybody really wanted to play well, not only for Bill Self, but Kansas University.
And I think that helped them in the game yesterday. You know, the pressure was, obviously it was on them, and they were on the big stage, but Kentucky was the favorite throughout the whole tournament. You know, you knew Kansas was going to come to play, and I think they did just that. They really impressed a lot of people. You know, Kansas is probably going to be the #1 team going into the Big 12 next year. They're going to have a lot of guys returning, so it's going to be interesting to see how Kansas turns things around. And the Big 12, for that matter, is going to be interesting.
And then now let's talk a little bit about Kentucky. They are the national champions.
Yep.
Calipari did get his national championship, and there's guys beside, like we have touched on, Anthony Davis, who really won this game for Kentucky. Kid Gilchrist, had 11 points. Doron Lamb had 22 points, had a dagger of a three-pointer.
Yeah.
When Kansas was on a 13-0 run late in the second half.
Back-to-back threes.
Back-to-back threes,
Yeah.
got it back up to 13 points, and Kansas was never really able to recover after that. So, like we said, this isn't a one-man band with Anthony Davis. These kids are, like you said, probably all lottery picks.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Davis doesn't have his best night, you're going to need those guys to have that. And like we saw that with Iowa State. Royce White doesn't have his best game. Scott Christopherson goes out and gets 20 points. Chris Allen goes out and gets 15, hits down, knocks down 5 3-pointers. So Kentucky's pretty similar in that fashion. I think that, as I said earlier, Kentucky didn't play their best game. But they proved how good they were. They proved why they're the #1 seed coming into the tournament. And, they well-deserving of this national championship they won last night.
Like you said, well-deserving. Kentucky Wildcats, your 2012 a national champion, so now a long couple months before we hit the hardwood once again.
What did you think of One Shining Moment, by the way?
I thought that was a very good thing.
It's always fun to watch that at the end, Iowa State got a few shots in there, too, so it's...
All righty. Well, congratulations to the Kentucky Wildcats on their national championship. We got to take our first break here on Cyclone InCYders. Coming up next, volleyball already been underway for the Cyclone women. About 2 months in already. Crazy. These girls never get any rest. We'll talk about that. We'll bring Andrew Snyder on for his insight right after this. Stay tuned. You're watching Cyclone InCYders. And welcome back to Cyclone InCYders alongside Matt Van Winkle and ISU TV's volleyball analyst Andrew Snyder joining us at the desk. He got an exclusive interview with Christy Johnson-Litz. We'll touch on that here in a little bit. So the volleyball season back underway, Andrew, and the Cyclones got a big win over Illinois.
Yeah, they did, and I talked to Coach actually about that yesterday, and what she had to say about that was that they're not really focused on the competitive aspects right now of this. What they're really focused on is just trying to get stuff built up. They lost a lot of players last year, actually 6 according to Coach yesterday, including Hannah Williams, Hannah Johnson, and the 4 seniors that graduated. So they've really been using the spring right now just to kind of flesh out, working out the kinks, and they're thinking about inserting a new offense even potentially with some of the recruits coming in. I know they're very excited, and they were pretty laid back at practice yesterday, and I think they're just ready for the season to start in August.
They lose one of their best outside hitters in Carly Jensen. Do you think it's going to be tough for this team to replace a girl that was their leader game in and game out?
Well, they actually have a lot of players returning that could potentially fill that role. Rachel Hockaday really played in the back row a lot last year, and we might see her return to that full rotation this season that she was on before she had the knee injury. You've got a couple of players in Allison Landwehr and Jamie Straube that are really going to fill that front really well as a setter and a middle blocker. So they have a lot of returning talent, and I think that while they will miss a lot of that senior leadership early on in the season, I think that at the end of the day, they got enough talent coming in, including in the recruiting class as well.
And a big part of why Iowa State had so much success last year, run to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament, was libero Kristen Hahn. She had 25 digs in that win over Illinois this weekend. So what is she going to have to do? She's going to really have to be a leader for this volleyball team.
Yeah, you hit that right. She's definitely been kind of that player who's really the spark plug. If you see her after every point, she's the one jumping up and down. She's the one that's really fired up back there, and she's kind of the key if they can keep things going. She had a fantastic season last year, so it's going to be really, really, I think, focal for her to step up her game even more, especially when you're losing some of those key players from last year. And having her come back this season is going to be huge because I know they lost an All-American when she came in. So you're looking at a team right now that's set up, and we'll talk with Christy Johnson-Lynch, have her comments here. She kind of mentioned that this year's goal is going to be that next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there we go.
About the next step. And the next step means winning a Big 12 championship. You know, we've come awfully close, but we haven't won one yet. Getting to the Final Four. We've come awfully close, but we haven't got there yet. So I think for us next year, it's about getting to that next step, that next level.
And another person that you were really impressed with that we heard Christy Johnson-Lynch right there was Tanisha Matlock.
Yeah, and Tanisha is going to be another one of those. If she can step up her game, we can really see the team achieve that goal of a Final Four. And that's what Christy was really harping on when I talked with her yesterday, is that's what all this work is going to be for in the spring, is to reach that Final Four. Because when I was up there in Minneapolis, it was really just high energy. A lot of Iowa State fans came on up, and I know it was really disappointing for that team to lose in front of what was a home crowd, and they played a really good Florida State team that came away with that in the fifth set. So what you're going to have to see is players like Matlock come in and be more consistent at the net. Last year she had some times maybe losing some concentration issues because she's still relatively young, and I think this year she's going to step into that bigger role, and her and Straube are really going to control that front along with Victoria Hurt.
And I think what helps this team a lot is they do have a lot of people returning from that team that made the NCAA tournament last year. Do you think, Andrew, that this team has what it takes to make a run late in the tournament next year?
It really depends. And when they hit the playoffs last year, when they went against Milwaukee, they really were able to turn it around. They had injuries throughout the middle part of the season. They were really dealing with just some inconsistencies on their offense. Things weren't clicking like they wanted to. And once they hit the first and second round of the playoffs, especially against Miami, things really started to click. And you could see that the offense was running on all cylinders. Everyone was healthy for possibly the first time all season long. So now what they have to hope for this year is that they're still healthy all season long, that these freshmen come in and are really able to kind of give breathers to a lot of these older seniors who are going to be heavily relied on, especially like Hockaday, who I think is another key of this team. And you kind of have to make sure, if you're Iowa State at least, to kind of get that rotation fixed and understand what it is early, because you're still going to have a very tough Big 12 conference to go up against this year.
I mentioned it earlier, Carly Jensen leaving the team, really that leader last year. Do you think Hockaday is going to be that player that's going to be the X factor, the girl that they're going to need to look to every night like they did with Jensen?
Well, I don't think there might be just that one player, though. Okay. I think you have a person like Jamie Straube, who was fantastic in the playoffs, who's really going to control that middle of the net, who's really going to try and get those kills and get those important blocks. She's going to be a huge key, and there's some questions about the health of her ankle as she had off-season surgery, but I think she's going to be another fantastic player, and of course Allison Landwehr setting up that offense. Hockaday's not going to be able to do much if Allison's not able to set it up, and Allison did a fantastic job in the postseason as well. This team has a lot of talent, and I can see them easily getting to the Elite Eight again. It's going to be a challenge to take that next step. I think they're ready. Coach Johnson-Lynch has made that a goal since she's been here for 7 years.
And one final thing, Andrew. I don't know if Christy Johnson-Lynch talked with you about this yesterday, but this team, their incoming freshmen aren't on campus yet, but does she expect those incoming freshmen to make an impact right away, or are they going to have to sit out a little bit?
Yes. I know that she didn't touch on that, but I get the feeling that they're really going to need to, because right now the roster is down to 9 players.
Exactly. That's why I was wondering.
So the 9 players they have right now, I think 8 of them are going to be on the regular rotation in terms of the front row and the back row. I think you're going to see some players possibly, on the offseason. The older players are really going to have to bring those freshmen in. It's going to be really pivotal, I think, for them to maintain that health throughout the season that they were kind of unable to do until the postseason, to really make sure that they stay healthy, stay fresh, because that Big 12 season is such a grind.
Yeah.
And we know the Big 12 season, Texas, they're going to be good. You got other teams like Oklahoma State that are also going to be top of the Big 12. That's a given. But Iowa State's starting to finally realize, and Christy Johnson-Lynch has established, Iowa State is one of those teams that's really going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12. It's going to be interesting to see how this team evolves, losing the seniors that they did, but also returning, as you said, a bunch of players. So it'll be interesting to see. Still a long way to go. We've got the summer grind and get ready for that first match coming up in August. Got to hit our second break here on Cyclone InCYders. I want to thank Andrew Snyder for joining us as we talked Iowa State volleyball. Coming up next for the final segment, we'll talk about the Iowa State football team. Stay tuned. You're watching Cyclone InCYders. welcome back to the final segment this evening here on Cyclone InCYders. As always, I'm Aaron Bauer. That's Matt Van Winkle. And I know everybody's excited, Matt, to get back to Jack Trice Stadium, watch his Iowa State football team coming off that trip to New York in the Pinstripe Bowl. But there's a pretty big question looming right now about this football team. Who's going to be taking the snaps?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and Paul Rhodes actually addressed that last weekend, and he talked to that Steele Jance, Jared Barnett, and Sam Richardson all have a chance coming into next year to be that starter. And the wide receivers have also been really talking up. I think it was Josh Lenz was really hyping up Sam Richardson and how well he's been doing this spring, and as a redshirt freshman last year, kind of was taking in everything that the coaches were telling him, and this year he's kind of understanding where this team's headed, what the program is all about, and I think that Sam Richardson's got a shot. The first day of spring practice, though, Paul Rhodes said that this guy has got a lot of improving to do, a lot of work to go about, and they held their first spring scrimmage on Saturday as well, and from what I heard, he did an outstanding job there too. So it sounds like he's really taking it to heart what the coaches want, and Paul Rhodes actually talked to the media on Saturday, and here's what he had to say about this spring practice.
If I could describe practice in 2 words, it would be intense and physical. Very, very pleased, even the first 2 days in helmets only, how we started, how we practiced, and what the tempo was.
You heard right there, Paul Rhodes really wants to have this tempo going, both not only on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball, where they've got a lot of improvement to do. We've talked about how they improved their secondary, losing Taryn Bett and a guy like Leonard Johnson. And they do that pretty quickly with 2 guys that have been there in Jake Knott and AJ Klein.
Oh, absolutely. These guys are a dynamic duo, probably the best in the Big 12, if not the nation. These guys, AJ Klein talked today that these guys, they've got some improvements to make. Last year wasn't their, they played good themselves, but the defense as a whole, they've got a lot of improvement to do, especially after they lose a lot of guys. It all starts with the defensive line, too. It all starts up front. You're going up against some of the biggest guys in the Big 12. And Iowa State, really, what their focus in the offseason was just getting bigger, getting stronger, improving their footwork. That was a big thing that Jake McDonough talked about, one of Iowa State's best defensive linemen. Really improving their footwork, getting bigger and stronger, because you're going up against these Oklahoma State, these Texases, some of the best teams in the country. You've got to get bigger, you've got to get stronger, and when you do that, you're going to force those turnovers that Klein and Knott really took advantage of last year.
Like you said, that's one thing Iowa State defense has always had trouble doing, it seems like, in the past few years, was, like you said, getting pressure on the quarterbacks.
Yes.
Cleon Lang, Jake McDonough, they're going to be a bunch of guys that need to contribute. Rosie Majik coming back after that ACL tear, he's going to have to get pressure off the edge if Iowa State's defense is going to be successful. And I think a key this year that Wally Burnham really needs to stress this defense is having the stops on 3rd down.
Yeah.
Last year, the opposing offenses, the defense got them into 3rd down situations. They just weren't able to stop them on the 3rd and 4th, 3rd and 5s, and these drives continued. And that's how Iowa State lost a lot of the games they did. And then you look at the vice versa, the games they won, Iowa State did get their stops on 3rd down and forced them to punt. And
absolutely, and you bring up a great point. And you also look at the turnovers last year. I think Iowa State had the most turnovers in the Big 12, if I'm not mistaken, and penalties too. That's something that the coaches really want to sharpen up and get into these guys' minds, that they've really got to eliminate those mistakes, on both sides of the ball. On defense, you got to make the tackle. That's something Iowa State on the corners have really struggled with lately. But lose a guy like Leonard Johnson, who is a great tackler, but you look back at teams that were coached by Chizik, those guys just could not tackle on defense. And it goes to the same on offense too. You've really got to secure the ball, and that's something that Steele Jance had a big problem with last year, and that's why Jared Barnett eventually got the start at quarterback.
And Steele Jance, he had that magical game against Iowa. We saw what he is capable of.
Yep.
But then you go back to the UNI game where he struggled for about 3 and 3/4 of a quarter there. The final last half of the second quarter there, he finally got together, did get Iowa State to win. And then you go back to the game in Connecticut, starts with 0 for 4 with 3 picks.
Yeah.
Horrible numbers for a quarterback, and that's not going to get you the W. Iowa State, fortunately, did come away from that Connecticut game with the W. Started out the season 3-0. And I know we've touched on this before. I think that really was the main reason Iowa State did get to the bowl game, knocking off teams like Iowa, Connecticut, and UNI.
And I think a lot of the reasons for those turnovers last year was that Steele Jance was still getting used to, and Jared Barnett for that matter, were still getting used to the offense. They were just learning the playbooks. Barnett was a freshman last year. Jance had just come in as a transfer. So these guys were still learning the playbook, which was pretty complex from what I've heard. This year, they're trying to simplify things. You know, the new offensive coordinator coming in, they're trying to simplify things. The playbook is, from what I've heard, is a smaller, but it's still going to have, it's still going to be in depth. It's still going to have all those good plays in there that Iowa State ran last year. But it's just going to be easier for the quarterbacks to understand, and I think they're definitely taking that to heart, and they're definitely learning from it as well.
And you said simplifying the playbook, not only for the quarterbacks, but that's also going to benefit these young receivers Iowa State has. You're returning Albert Gary, Aaron Horn, Josh Lenz. Josh Lenz really the only guy who had significant contributions. Albert Gary late, and Aaron Horn did have a few big catches. But Jarvis West is another guy I'd like to keep an eye on this year. But they're going to be young at the receiving position, and that's going to hurt the quarterbacks as well, because last year they had the luxury of Darius Darks and Darius Reynolds, a couple of guys that were there and really kind of bailed out these young quarterbacks in certain situations. And this year, they're not going to have that luxury of experience.
I'll tell you what, that's what spring ball is all about, getting familiar with your wide receivers as your quarterback, building a chemistry with these guys, and they're going to figure that out through spring.
Opening night against Western Illinois, just a few months away here. A lot of people getting excited. And quick prediction here as we end the show tonight. Iowa State, you gotta make it a bowl game. We'll go way ahead next year. You think they make it to a third straight bowl game?
You're throwing me a curveball here. I think they probably will be similar to what they were last year. They'll probably get close. They'll hang around 5 wins, maybe sneak in that 6th win at the end there. So I'll go ahead and say yes this early on in the season. Why not?
I think Iowa State, they pick up another signature win. They've done it the last few years, whether it's Texas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma State shocking the nation last year. So it's going to be interesting to see a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement around the Iowa State football team. But we're out of time tonight, and we're out of time all year here on Cyclone InCYders. Want to give a big shout out to Dan the Assassin Casson doing this show first semester, and Matt filling in for him. Second semester did a great job. Also, can't forget all the people behind the scenes: Aaron, Kenzie, Katie, Andrew, Brandon, Ricky, Zach, Cody, Ben, and Justin. Couldn't do it without them. So for Matt Van Winkle, he shot a video package here we'll leave you with tonight. Thanks for joining us all year on Cyclone InCYders.
All that being said, it's been decided, by the people that I trust that, becoming a professional is probably what's best.